And there we are, right there. Wave high, Trevor. Damn, David and Robert and Glenn were like hanging in there waiting. And so is Dennis. People just jumping in there, going, it's Friday. It's Friday. Everyone say goodbye to Trevor. Trevor's leaving tomorrow for Germany. Do you go to Germany first?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Germany, Czech, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, and Poland.
It's Germany, then Poland.
Okay, I didn't think it had to be in
Slovakia.
order.
Then the Czech, and then Hungary.
Is it Czech or Czech Republic?
That's
The Czech?
It's either Czech Republic, the Czech, Czechia.
And only two of those companies use euros, correct?
I don't know.
Someone was having that discussion, and I said, yes, only two of them use euros. I said the other three have their own currency. Yeah. Hey, Lacey. And everybody's joining in. Yeah, so Trevor's getting ready to go off to, is this an end of the year party? End of the year gathering? End of the year barbecue?
I don't know. It's just...
Anyways, with
fun.
his co-workers. So, bye.
I have to go download an app for the trip. So I have to figure out what my password is.
Anyhow, that will be the last you see of Trevor, unless he pops in again before he leaves, because Trevor's heading for Europe tomorrow. So, and he'll be gone for a while, and that's what we were doing in here. Before this, we spent all day getting the next couple of weeks of videos and content and everything all done up, filmed, edited, and set so that everything except for my doing lives on Friday, the next couple of Fridays, is seamless and there's no bumps in the road. So there he goes. Yep, he's gone. So there it is. Dang, soon as he left. What do you mean by that? It shows green on my end. Have a good trip. Have an awesome trip. Hi, everybody. Okay, I'm going through. I don't see any problem. As soon as he... Oh, you're maybe... I don't know. Yeah, he's on his way to something. He really was preoccupied with like, man, I should take something. Because they're cooking burgers and they have food and stuff. And so they're all meeting up there and Trevor's like, what should I take? I'm like, I don't know, a bottle of wine? I'm not sure, the decorum for what they're doing because he didn't share a lot. And so he said, well, I should take some sort of food, bring some sort of food. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he's bringing fruit, like a fruit bowl of stuff. It's very nice. He did buy the fruit. He did not prepare it. So he's going to meet with his co-workers and their barbecue, the head of the CTE department, and the film and media instructor, and the photography teacher. And next year he will also be teaching marketing. But all that being said, the man with a master's who just got accepted to Grand Canyon University on his doctorate program, and when they ask him, did you make that? He's going to have to say, no, my mom did. So, kind of funny. He's obviously not listening because he would pop in here and try to defend that action. Anyhow, so there you go. So he's dang soon as he left. I don't know what that means, and nobody's talking. So it's like I show green lights everywhere, like we are streaming, and nobody's talking. It makes me feel all alone. Anyhow. See, I got all choked up. Yeah, nobody's typing. That's weird. Yeah, I show that I am streaming like crazy. I'm going to have to check myself. Because usually you guys will prompt and come in and tell me, oh, it's all good. Well, yeah, as soon as I bring everything up. You got to remember, I have to take everything literal. I'm going to have to set up a little monitor that shows me the live stream, even though it's distracting because there's about a minute delay, but okay, so I can tell some more if anyway, so there we go. We're all done. But we got the next couple of videos up for Mondays. They should be good ones. Everybody should enjoy those. Very interesting. One's topical, but we'll have those set. And then we got this day in the Superstitions, a bunch of that stuff nailed out, which is quite popular. And I don't know what else. So, and then I'll be working on some content, some stuff with Tyler. I'm going to see if Tyler has any ideas of some things, or we're going to dig through the library and stuff on some stuff. See if we can pull. No, Trevor is not happy because, well, this here, I think this is in 4K, but it streams live. But everything we film anymore, Trevor really wants to always do in 4K. And Tyler is doing 2K. So it's kind of, Trevor feels that's such a huge drop in quality, which I don't think it really matters. But yeah, I thought, man, if we can get some stuff done and let Tyler, who has a degree in film, let him take some shots at it, that's fine. He's done stuff before and it's been fine. So anyways, that's the thought process. It went off, now you're back on. Yeah, everybody else seems to think, oh, I don't know. Okay, so anyways, I can see the green thing, and it's running hard and fast today, and I got everything set up in here, so it should be good outside of the sunspots. Anyhow, been a busy week. All weeks are busy when you work all the time. Unfortunately, yesterday was, 106? Today's only 99 out, see? It's mellow. It's cool, rather cool. But yeah, yesterday was like 106. I felt it a little. So getting into the summer swing of things, which probably means the end of most of the trips deep in the mountains and a lot of stuff. So all I'll ask, have you been their situation in Soups? Yeah, well, not dire situations, but back in the day, probably the reason I ended up with diarrhea a couple times, I would always drink from the springs. I would always try to treat it, boil it mostly, but Bluff Springs, a few of the different springs, I would get water off of them. Now they have the filtration unit, so you can just filter straight into your bottle, which is just as good. I would say there's no problem with that. I did it before just to do it, to waste water. There was a story I was actually going to do about a time I didn't do that, and I thought about it, and my worry was, because I didn't know how long I was still going to be out, I didn't want to do it because if I ended up getting a little sick, the problems it would have. So, but I have drunk from the springs and the water from in the mountains. And primarily the main one I think I've drank from or got water from most of the time and cooked from was Bluff Springs. I know I've replenished water there. Usually we just brought in our own water, and I'm not much of a water drinker. So usually most of my water was still there. My cans of Dr. Pepper disappear as I hike. I know, that just sounds awful. Are you doing anything special this holiday week? Yeah, I'm dropping 2 kids at the airport to go to Europe. No, actually, I'm spending Sunday. My nephews will be over. 2 of my nephews. So, yeah, they'll have to. Maybe I need to record that mayhem. But no, not really. Don't do. It's hot. It gets hot. I'm not a get out on the lake guy and that kind of stuff in the summer, and that's long my past. So I will probably spend my 3-day weekend dropping my kids off, hanging around for 4 or 5 hours with my nephews, and otherwise reading books, because there's a number of books I've gotten. Even though I just finished one off, I will be reading some things and just chilling. So just relaxing, because now I'm in the hot weather time of year where I'll be physically out every day in the heat. And because of that, I'll be trying to relax as much as possible in between. So that's probably it. Have you ever looked for the pistols Bias boot Huey. Oh, you're talking about Larry Hedrick's story. Frank and I talked about it. I know Larry. He didn't feel Larry ever really did much of a search for him. We knew the general areas he was talking. We looked it over. When we went in, we didn't really look. We talked about several areas they could be in. Then there was problems with the story. Frank was very critical of the whole tail story and everything about it. I wanted to go out and search a couple areas because there was some areas along there that kind of made sense. And I asked Frank, and when we went out, we had nothing to do with searching for them. We did other things. We looked at prospects and looked at old mine dumps and explored other things. So I guess it's no. It was in the back of my mind, and was kind of early on. But I don't know if Larry spent much time looking for them as much as he thought about them. That's a prospector's thing, remember, is the more you think about it, the closer you are. The more you look for it, the further it gets away. So, let's see. But what is that? What do they call that story? God, he's done it like 8 times. They just keep doing updates on a story they're not even searching for. Any word when the video you did at night will be coming out? What video at night? You're going to have to do that. Hola, Dallas. Hey, Dallas. What night video? You have to really, really help me on that because I've done a number of videos at night and I'm never happy with them. I find them really boring and they don't seem to work. Yeah, it's the Dragoon thing. Yeah. So, the Dragoon pistols. Ooh. That, I don't know. Frank was very different than that. Ghost hunt. I don't know what Trevor ever did with the rendezvous ghost hunt footage. There was the stuff we had at Burns Ranch we did. And that's all, I don't know, that's somewhere on a hard drive over there. So, back behind me. This side. It's back on one of the hard drives. There is so much stuff that sometimes I'm sitting there thinking, did we ever film that? Yeah. Did that ever come out? And I start talking to him about it because there's so much stuff piled up that we never released. It didn't fit with something because the last time we did a whole season, we kept it really based on the spiral and things around it. So we didn't want to deviate. So anytime we did anything different, we just compiled the material. So I don't know. So if you're talking about the one from the rendezvous, I don't know what happened with that. I don't know what he did, how much he filmed, and then the Rangoon pistols. Yes, the Rangoon pistols. Isn't that Chinese food? Anyways, so if it's that one, and then I went out. I actually guided a group in, but I didn't film that. I took a few pictures when we got back to their RV. I gotta remember their names. I'm gonna have to look it up, and then for next week, because I've got to let everybody know when to watch that. Their group, they got 10 million subscribers, and they do million and a half views. They travel all over the world, and they have their own RV when they're in the U.S., and they showed up, and they paid me to guide them in the mountains. And unlike most shows, I will authentically say this, I did take them back in the mountains. I told them, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to take you in the mountains. This isn't going to be, we walk in 100 yards and sit down and you play ghost hunt, and then we're going to take you back where there's no radio microwaves. We're going to take you to a certain specific spot and do this and all. And so I did that with them. We were back in there from probably about 10, 11 o'clock to about 4 in the morning. So we did that. Diane's already telling us have a great Memorial Day weekend. She's already popping beers and having a good time. So it could be that one. And then there's been a couple other ones we've done, but I did it for years. I would set up the mini DVs, and let them film at night. So in the night vision, just to get footage of things. Because I always said, if there's supposed to be something to something, let's see what happens at night, other than somebody sleepwalking or people going to the restroom. And but I never saw anything on those things. And that was one of the problems with one thing we did with Burns Ranch and Bob Ward's cabin was there was nothing. There was no audio. There was no. It just was quiet. You could catch occasional bug. So you got that right. Took today off. See, there you go. She's done. I watched, I think it was Mythbusters. It featured from... No. This one is just... We just filmed last month. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. It's a Dick Holmes Fall of Waltz. I think we're in... Okay. Or had the clues. Okay, I don't know. Okay, I don't know what that is. This is a group. We just went in and... I can't remember what their name. I'm going to have to look it up. But anyways, they were a really nice group of people. They're actually kind of well known to a younger audience. Very popular. People were very surprised that I went out with them. They're like, they went out with you? So I was the old fart with them. And we went out and they did their thing with their spirit box and their music box. And they did their EVPs and a bunch of stuff. When that comes out, I'll explain some of it after the fact, but I want people to enjoy it. And they paid cash, so I'm not going to complain. And I think it should be 2 parts. They may come back to do something with me somewhere else. We talked about a few places and things, so if it does well. But I did really want to make it like not the hokey, what I see through in the TV shows. I said, if you're going to do this, and millions of people are going to watch this, I want to really make sure that you guys have a possibility, a place where if something happens, you have to give it a moment and say, is there a possibility what this could mean, you know? Even if you're a skeptic, very hard skeptic like myself, you have to have a moment of saying, that's interesting. I didn't want it to be the typical what it is on television, or most YouTube channels have really schlock. And had the clues, left the tongue, I don't know. Dutchman died in his own No, he didn't. Dutchman died at Julia's house. Any Spanish canon stories and the superstitions are found. No, Jacob Waltz died at Julia's house. There was a few people that really tried to stir that up. One of the things I think we have for next month's This Day of the Superstitions to kind of give it up, but it is an interesting one, is when Brownie Holmes took the newspaper down to show them where Jacob Waltz was buried. Of course, he had the wrong grave because Dick Holmes had no idea where he was buried. So the place he actually... Julia didn't live in a shack. She had a nice house down on Jackson. She had a boarding house. But he took them to the wrong gravesite, an unmarked grave that wasn't Jacob Waltz and nowhere near Waltz's. Because, like a number of other things, he had no clue. And his dad had no clue. Which is one of those problems with the Holmes manuscript. When you start going around, you find there are completely wrong things in it. Jacob Waltz said, I wasn't a citizen of it. And Jacob Waltz was a citizen. He was a naturalized citizen, and he was very aware of it. Julia was aware of it. Reinhardt was. Jim Bark. Somehow Dick Holmes, who buddied up to him and talked with him before he died, had no clue because Waltz told him the opposite. I don't think he was in that feverish of a state. I don't think Dick Holmes was there. Yeah, Julia had a house. I don't know if it had any outbuildings for guests or if they... Waltz died there, and that's what the newspaper says. I don't think they would have got it that wrong. But, you know, there was a person in the community that really tried to have it. He died at her place, and they sat with him. But that with the Holmes stories is problematic. I think the Dick Holmes story became, he died at Julia's store, which, let's have a dying man at the store all the time. But, yeah, the original story is Dick Holmes and his wife heard Julia out in the street and came out and asked her what was going on. And then Dick Holmes, being the, you know, he was a man's man, so he told her, you go get the doctor here at 6 in the morning. I'll go sit with Waltz. Because, you know, he was a stand-up guy like that. And, but that was the original story. And then later it became the Gideon Roberts story, which couldn't be verified. And then Gideon Roberts and Holmes got to him at the store, and then the person that was pushing that narrative, because he knew all, pushed it into, it was in a back room, then it was in a outbuilding behind the store, and then it turned out he had the wrong store or the wrong store site, and things weren't, it just got worse and worse. And then they found out they couldn't even find Dick Holmes lived anywhere at that time near Walt's. It just kept unraveling, and the person didn't know how to stop, so he kept making up more stuff. If you ever go back and look at that stuff on one of the forums and find that stuff, it is kind of funny. Did you ever find anything of interest on Coffee Flats? Never at Spanish Graveyard. No. Castle Rock? Never found anything interesting there. It's an interesting formation, and I was worried about snakes because of the rocks and getting up in there. But I know Randy went out there a few times. I went out there, and I don't think either of us, anybody found anything. I don't know if, other than, was it Ray Howland? Other than Ray Howland saying he found that Spanish armor there, I don't know if anybody ever said they found anything there at all. So it's kind of an odd story. But I went out because of that and decided, well, we'll just kind of like go up and down and grit it up and look under every nook and cranny to see if anything's there or slid down over time with erosion. Never found anything there that ever said anything to me. Do you think Jacob Waltz ever high graded from the Vulture Mine? No, don't think that either. I think that was when the Vulture Mine started doing its little ghost town thing. That became a big deal of like, they really tried to document it with no documentation, and they pushed that narrative really, really hard. Could have you come down through there by the Hacienda or something? Yeah, that's nowhere near the Vulture, of course. But, yeah, you know, and Schaefer, Albert Schaefer, and his partner, John Beggs, had a claim along the Hacienda they were at. Could it be related to Waltz? Could be, from his time in the mountains. But he seemed, if you notice the names from he leaves Los Angeles and then enters, and when he first comes to the border, and then he ends up in Prescott, and he ends up coming down and then coming to Phoenix, you'll find there's a lot of names around the same time period at the same places. And I don't think those names, while they might have done some plastering or works along the Hacienda and around Wickenburg more proper, I don't think any of them were at the Vulture Mine. That's why that became sort of problematic. He had quit working for other people. I know he worked, I can't remember who it was, he worked with someone in Los Angeles, or somewhere around there, and then shortly after that, alongside someone else, Rivas was in that camp. Rivas worked a claim near him, and then Waltz worked him. Once he got to Prescott and he had his citizenship papers, he began filing on his own, which is the Gross Load, and then later the Big Rebel, the General Grant, which are the three we know of. And Waltz seemed to be his own guy at that point. He wasn't going and doing assessment work and stuff for other people. And that's what my thought would be, is he was doing well enough to just hold up on his own, and he probably felt like he could do better than the guys he was working for. Dutchman died like David Carradine. No, he didn't. Did David Carradine even really die? That's the thought process. Maybe it's all a setup. Maybe he's kung fu walking cane across the country. Right on, Wayne. Yes, always watch History Channel and think Wayne can have a good... Go get it, my friend. I don't know if I'd want to do anything with it. You know, one of the biggest problems while doing television is the editing process. One, you don't know what's going to show on television. Two, no matter what information you give them, you don't know what they're going to represent. So they're pulling stuff off the internet and this and that. Everyone on our show, I gave all the producers, executive producers, and even I think the camera guys, sound guys, they got copies of the Bark Notes. And I gave them reading list information and stuff. I wanted them all to have an idea of what we were doing. I mainly first brought this stuff for the other guys because Frank, Woody, Eric, and Eric had no clue about the Dutchman. They had no idea about that stuff. So I brought it to bring them up to speed so they don't look like a bunch of dumbasses when I'm talking. They kind of have an idea of the story. So there was a lot of catch up. But I shared it with everyone because very early on, the other guys would go and they would not be, and I would be in a production meeting sitting there listening. And my main thing was they'd go, well, what do we do about this, Wayne? Do you got any ideas of how to segue certain things and ideas? Or, is there a history point we could throw in here? And that was a big deal for me, was to pipe in with stuff. So I gave them that stuff to do that because of all those problems, and you can't be the showrunner and be the talent in the show. There's so many. I don't know if I thought History's Greatest Mysteries would be the one, since they let me work the script, they let me work the questions, and then because I didn't work the answers. And in the end, they didn't want to use my answers as much as other people's answers to my questions. And that turned out, it turned out fine, but it wasn't the straight truth that I wanted. I really wanted to kind of like have something that I could look at and say, you know what, they got it all right there. And that's a problem. All right, let's go. Oh, I thought he was sort of a separate building in the back of Julia's. That was, someone else passed that on, and then almost all their material, I think that they passed on. And I wouldn't say it's all, because they might have found some good things when they researched. A lot of that individual's materials that they contributed and they talked about was absolutely false. A lot of it was fraudulent. And I don't know if he watches this. If he watches us and he's looking, I hope he's well. I hope he's doing fine. And I never personally in person am going to ever have a problem and call him out in front of people's face and try to embarrass him. But quietly, privately, for those who know, yes, it was absolute, don't do that, because it's one thing to believe something different, it's another thing to purposely try to undermine things. And that's what he did, and he did it with a relish, and we have not recovered 20 years later from that. Some people are very angry about it, because it's hard to get out of your head when someone does that. Let's see. Have any Jesuit crosses been found other than the one in the Guano Cave? Not that I know of. I don't know. There's the Bilberry crosses. Those were stone-carved crosses. I don't know of many crosses. Celeste Maria Jones supposedly had those crosses. Her and Louis went and buried up on Coffee Flat. Had Bob Ward with them, and they hauled all that stuff up. And I don't know what those were comprised of or what it was. That story's in, I think, Bob Ward's Ripple of Lost Echoes, or Echoes of Lost Ripples, or Ripple Wine, or whatever. But, I think that's the only one I really have of a lot. There was supposed to be a cross, the bronze cross story for that cave, but I don't know if anything was on that. That was out of a copper alloy, not really bronze, but that was the name of it. Was probably better for the story of the Cave of the Bronze Cross and the Cave of the Copper Composite. So I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there's a few other stories. I think Ed Piper had one about something he found. Let's see. Was the back cave cross even a Jesuit cross? I don't know. Never saw it. You see the same thing I saw. Smash that like button. Thank you there, Gilbert. There. Smash it. Smash it. Smash it. Wayne, thank you for all you've done. You have a great show. I'm one day closer to escape from the hellhole, Illinois. Oh, there you go, Bobby. Yes. We're going to have to take out a chart of the months and days of when Bobby will return. And then we're going to have to pick days kind of like a football pool when Bobby will step foot back in Arizona. Bobby, you've been coming for at least 6-7 months now, 8 months. But you'll get here. You'll get here. You don't have to get here for a while now because it's too freaking hot. So there you go. Any idea what the cross is on the Grazia's 18 painting? No. And who knows what was going on in the mind of de Grazia. He was a smart guy, and he liked to put a lot of clues and a lot of things into what he did. So that is always interesting with DeGrazia. The more I got a lot of stuff on DeGrazia, and whenever I can get material on him, I actually bought, it's a 2-record set, vinyl, of him talking. And I bought that, and it cost me like $50, but I bought it because I just want to hear, because I know he was really like that. There was a lot more coming out than you knew. Great at marketing, obviously. But I'm always interested in kind of what he was doing. I wish I had copies of his films. I wish they would market that, because I'd love that stuff to be out there. Because even though they might seem like amateur home videos to most people today, I would like to see kind of what we could interpret from that. Because everything he did, I think at times could be interpreted and interpretive. I think we also talk about A Day in the Superstition Mountains, spoiler alert, where DeGrazia's house in Apache Junction, way back when, sold for $500,000. So that was the gallery, Superstition Gallery, that I think it was the fight with the city. They just never would let him be, and fought him so hard on it that he eventually just gave up. The TV series Kung Fu, Carradine wasn't the master. He was Kwai Chang Caine, grasshopper. So you got that wrong. You tried to make a joke, and you tried to be funny and silly, and you blew that. He wasn't the master. No, he was the student. Yes, he was Caine, looking for his half-brother in California. One of the most successful and highest-rated westerns ever on television. That show was hugely successful and considered a western, even though it's kind of more of a kung fu karate. And the original person to play that character that was rejected was Bruce Lee. They took Carradine because, one, you could understand him better, they felt. They wanted to be someone biracial, which they thought he could pass, and he was a dancer, so he could do a lot of the movement and stuff and do really well with that, because he was an actor of note from Broadway and stuff, and they thought he would fit the part. And I got a book on his talking when he did the show, and that the show never failed. He just decided he did not want to do the show anymore. He felt it had run its course. He felt the production group wasn't coming up with the best of ideas, didn't know where it would go in the future, and that was the end. In Search Of was my favorite show. I remember watching that with Leonard Nimoy. Yeah. Not Nemo, Nimoy. Been watching since then. Yeah, Leonard Nimoy, that was kind of cool. In Search Of. And, now you look back at it and go, man, that stuff's kind of dorky now. But, no, that was such a cool show, because you rarely didn't even get to find the books. That was when that kind of stuff, Chariots of the Gods and The Lost Ark and Bigfoot, started getting popular and showing up in pulp paperbacks and stuff. And so that show was kind of cool, because it do the Loch Ness Monster and some interesting stuff. It was a very unique show. The early version of Josh Gates. My mind slips me. Your mind slipped. Have you heard of the Kikoweed Mine? It's not in the Cedar near San Bernardino. No, I haven't run across that file yet. Underground river with lots of gold. That's what I was told Blind Frog Ranch was. I was told Blind Frog Ranch, which, remember, if you watched the first season, they drilled into a cave that had water in it. And that was what they sold me on, was they were drilling, and they drilled into this aquifer or something, or underground river, and the bits came up and they had gold in them. And they believed there was gold in this underground thing. And I said, I don't know why you want me. That's definitely not my thing, or where my knowledge would be based. And they said, well, they wanted someone somewhat popular, someone from another show to be in there. They ended up picking not our Eric's, but the other Eric from Ice Cold Gold. And they were searching for a name to give it credibility. And I kind of like, I've talked about it before when they started bringing up, oh yeah, the Navajo this and witchcraft and stuff. And I said, okay, you're trying to do Skinwalker Ranch on Blind Frog Ranch. You're trying to make Discovery Channel's version of History Channel's show. And I said, I don't know if I'm the guy for that. If you'll pay me this amount of money, I'll do it. And then they wanted to negotiate. And I said, no, I just told you what I would do it for. Because I didn't really want to go up there and do it. I didn't care. It wasn't about the money or anything else. It was just, I couldn't get into it. And I watch it as a joke. I watch it now because Josh Feldman's in it, so I'm supportive of Josh being in it. And I told Josh that. I said I watch it. I call it the Josh Feldman Show, and I hoped that he would bring something to it. But the problem is, he doesn't get to sit there and edit it. He doesn't know what's going to happen or how they're going to twist things. So, and I talked to him about it, how one scene that lasts maybe 90 seconds, less than 90 seconds, he's standing there talking and his backpack's in front of him, his backpack's behind him, his backpack's on his back, it's on one shoulder. So every time they're cutting to him, his backpack is mysteriously moving around on its own, which means they did multiple takes, different things, and then the edit was just, which is one of the biggest problems with television today. They're so sloppy. They don't expect you to go and really catch all the sloppiness, which in Legends was me wearing two shirts, one inside the other, and when they wanted to film something retro, spective from the first few weeks, I would switch shirts. I had a blue shirt under the button-up, and I had a gray one. So sometimes I'd be wearing the wrong shirts, or you'd see one shirt sticking out from the other because I'm switching back and forth on camera between them. And I was like, you guys could have covered that and done that. Yes, I'm an outcast. I never bought into Carradine. Yeah, when I was a kid, that was a big thing. My friends were into everybody was always into certain shows, but I remember watching that and thinking that was so cool in prime time. And that had to be, 71, 72, 73, right in that era. And that would be just when I thought my parents had something on television I would watch, because other than that, it would be Lawrence Welk, Hee Haw, the Nightly News. I mean, think about it. I didn't, Bonanza, Gunsmoke. There wasn't a lot of choice of, I came from a household where someone we didn't have a remote. I was the TV channel remote, but someone else determined what you were going to watch. And then I would try to sit up and say, can I sit up and watch this? And I would watch PBS like Monty Python and stuff when I was allowed to. But I rarely, I got to watch the Saturday morning action westerns and the horror movies. So I loved Godzilla and that stuff. But I didn't get to watch there wasn't a lot of television. Star Trek, I hated Star Trek. I'd never, and that was already in repeats. That was, when I got to see it. But Star Trek was okay for something to watch, but I was never a sci-fi guy, was the problem. I liked Godzilla, but I liked horror movies. So Godzilla kind of fit that. But I would prefer the horror movies and the westerns and then the action films. The sci-fi stuff, to this day, I never was a huge sci-fi fan, which is, I will always tell Trevor, is I love Indiana Jones, but then when it was the fourth movie, got kind of the sci-fi space alien shit, I just was over it completely. I was like, man, this is one of my favorite movie things, and they just ruined everything for me. So, Duncan, the Clan MacLeod. Duncan MacLeod of the Clan, the Highlander. So now we're into old films and stuff, but the Highlander. And what was it with him? The actor that did that. I'm trying to think of his name. Anyways, his vision is so bad he can't see more than a couple feet, 3 feet in front of him, just anything. And when he did Tarzan, they took his glasses off. He would stumble around at times, but they worked it out. And when he did that, he got that weird faraway look, and they did that in the Highlander too. I'm trying to, Christopher Lambert, One of those two. Anyways, he's a pretty good actor. French actor. Is he Belgian? Belgian? He's one of the two. But anyways, he's a pretty good actor. He's been in some good films. But yes, I liked the original film. And then they did the TV series after that. The Highlander was pretty cool. Where did you get interested in the Superstitions and the Lost Dutchman mine? Well, Planet of the Apes was good when it was out. I was 9 or 10, and we'd went out to buy the Superstitions because we always would go out and do stuff. And, you had Apache Land and all this different stuff. And I got to go on a hike where we went in from First Water, and we went all the way through to Peralta Trailhead, which back then was all different, looked different. The trails were very different. And I just remember I've talked about it quite a bit. I had a paper sack lunch. I didn't have a backpack even. All the gear was being transported, and we were supposed to walk through the mountains. And one group was going to stay down by Weaver's Needle between Pinion Camp and Ed Piper's. The rest of us were going to continue through. I don't know the logistics or what the whole deal with it was, because I was just a kid. I was not even a piece of baggage. I was just a piece of paper blowing alongside. And I had a canteen full of grape Kool-Aid, and I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and some corn chips in a little Ziploc baggie, and then I had an apple. And as I was walking, I was wearing a ball cap and my Converse All-Stars, and as I was walking, my hand was sweating and it wore out the paper bag, and I had to start eating my food. So before we even got to Needle Basin, I'd eaten all my food. But I just kept walking, looking around. Now, I don't remember anybody talking, and I'm sure people talked about the Dutchman and stuff like that. All I remember is just as a little kid looking up and down and thinking, man, I've run around in the woods, I've run around in the desert, I've done, but this is just incredible. And that's my memory of like a dream of just walking through this place and like, what is this place? What is this about? I got out of that, and then for the spring break, that would probably be in January, around spring break, Easter time, a friend of my dad's went in the Grand Canyon down, the Kaibab, came out the Bright Angel. And my dad couldn't make the trip, and his friend was going with his son, who he had been divorced and hadn't seen his son, who was probably a teenager. They took me along on that trip. Now, remember, I'm 9 or 10. I had a pack with no frame. I went on that trip, was absolutely useless, but I got to go through the Grand Canyon at such a young age. And pretty unusual circumstance through that time, and kind of made me see the world differently, even though the Superstitions was the thing. Grand Canyon was cool, don't get me wrong, but Superstitions was super cool. And when I got done, my birthday came around. That individual I went in the Grand Canyon with bought me a book, and I don't know where it's at. It's in the other room. It's called The Complete Book of Camping. It's a big, thick book. Excellent book on, woodsmanship and all this kind of stuff, but he got me that book, and then someone else got me The Killer Mountains, because I kept talking about the Superstitions. I wanted to go back there. And that summer, I had to have read The Killer Mountains 20, 30, 40 times. I literally would read it, finish the book, and start right back over on it. And then all I wanted to do was, I was looking at the map in there that they have, that sketched map of Bluff Springs Mountain, and I kept picking in the stories and that map of places I wanted to go. I wanted to be where people were in there. The story about Waltz is pretty much a document correct one, so it's very cool. So it got me on the right path, but that was the big thing. And then as that carried on, because summertime we weren't going out there, as the fall got and we were starting to make plans and we would make trips, the big deal to me was I wanted to know more about the Superstitions. Someone gave me a copy. One I got as a gift. The other one, someone just gave me a copy off their bookshelf. One was Sim Zeeley's Lost Dutchman Mine. The other was Barry Storm's Thunder God's Gold, which are kind of awkward books for a kid who's 10, 11, 9, 10, 11 years old. But I digested them, realized it was confusing with Killer Mountains, but I realized Killer Mountains did have documentation that seemed to make more sense. And then we went back in the Superstitions that year and continued every January and February spending times when I was a kid out there. And that was the building block on that. I don't know how much I knew about the Dutchman. I started to hear people in camp talk about it. People would approach and show up when we spent a lot of time. There was a lot of trips we spent in Pinion Camp and down by Peralta Spring and Willow Spring. And when we would be there, people would come into camp, have cups of coffee, and I got to meet people, and that just I kept learning more and listening to people. And that was kind of the beginning of it all. And so you have that period where I'm just a kid, and then I keep learning more and more and gathering books and learning and finding out there's more books, and then the more material I got, and then it kind of dissipates where I just like going out in the mountains. It wasn't, I would explore and search and kind of check stuff out, but I wasn't sure what to think of the Dutchman and Dutchman's sense. And it kind of seemed like there was too many variations of the story. At that point, I started really digging in, and then there was the Tom Collenborn's Ride Through Time, Helen Corbin's Curse of the Dutchman, and I realized there was a new, different version. It wasn't the Eric von Daniken and the BS, what you would call the paranormal, sci-fi, UFO garbage that I was seeing in books I was buying that was just like, it was fictional nonfiction. These were actually pretty good books with documentation, and I could follow up on things, and that changed that course. So I can't say when I had so much knowledge of the mountains and where people camped and had seen things, and that's one of the reasons I could have met how many people in the mountains, but I have no idea, because my eyes at that age of what I'm seeing in the mountains is different than the person I would be later. So I don't guess. I saw all kinds of guys packing in and out of the mountains, and groups of 1, 2, 3. I don't know who anybody was. And it could be people I knew, I would recognize today. But because it's through those younger man's eyes, I don't relate to it. Now, Al Morrow, Chuck Ayler, those guys were, I'm pretty sure they were all dead by the time I was in the mountains. But, the people were there. I'm always surprised to find out there were people. I didn't know that. So I know I didn't meet a lot of people, but I kind of kept to myself. And I didn't, I kind of felt, don't stick your nose into other people's business when you're back there, especially when I'm 16, 17, 18, and I'm out there by myself. Stay out of other people's ways. All right, so that's kind of that, Dennis. When is Sal's next trip? I don't know if Sal's going in, what he's doing. I talked to him on the phone about a couple things, and that was it. And I don't know if Sal goes out unless someone takes him out there. He doesn't drive. Do you remember when you found your first gold? I was young. We went somewhere, and they were prospecting, and I do remember having a little piece of vial with some gold in it. It was from plastering somewhere, and I remember it. I don't know what happened to it. I'm sure who knows where it's at. But I remember that. But that wasn't... To me, there was a drive of finding something. I would rather find the lost mine than placer or dig somewhere else. Now, my mindset's different now. I'll dig for people and help people out and do stuff, and I find it interesting. I have never kind of got that tingle of seeing color in my pan. I go, oh, cool, there's color in this. Man, that's pretty cool. Yeah, this could be some good gold. Woody, Frank, there's people that really get that. It doesn't, not to me. There's the exploration of how did it form here? Where did it come from? This is pretty cool. So to me, with Woody and Frank's claim where they pulled 20 grand out of there in those pockets of those little nuggets, I'm more like, well, I wonder how this worked and how it worked its way through the mountains and where it broke off of and how it traveled through the ground over millions of years. That to me was the interest, because somewhere there's a vein or something broke off where there's more money. And once I get there, there's probably another story for me to chase. If that makes sense, that's kind of more my thinking and how I am. Another old show would be Treasure Lost Treasure. I don't know that. There was I don't remember that show. All right, Apache Land was when Apache Land was. It's now becoming high. Yeah, it is. Apache Land's long gone, except for the barn, the chapel, a couple other things at the museum. Well, they weren't going to be filming westerns there. There's a place down in Wilcox they film westerns, and then where they filmed Tombstone. Or is it Benson or Wilcox? They had that movie studio, and then old Tucson's still around. Apache Land, they weren't filming weekly TV shows and as many western films, so it just wasn't probably profitable to come back because it wasn't going to have the work it did at one time. I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything. So, yeah, and I don't know what Sal's doing most of the time. I talk to him, and who knows. Great memories from the past. Well, that's what you get. I lived in Apache Junction years ago. Acquired a little book called Spirits in the Mountains. I enjoy your broadcast. Okay. Spirit in the Mountains, is that the Johnson brothers? Bill and, is it Michael was his brother? They got involved with the Spiral with Salvador and Paul Zellner when they came out here. And Randy and I ended up hooking up with them. I got a really nice signed copy of their book. When they released their book, we had forums, and I wrote on the forums. What does that say down there? Acquired. But I took it upon myself at the time because nobody ever really we were all like, oh, is there a new book out? And I kind of thought someone should talk about what they thought of the book. And so, because we kind of did that a little with Corbin's Bible, and then we did it with Thomas Glover's first two books, Golden Dream and Holmes Manuscript, and some others. And you skipped my question, Wayne. Well, I remember the name, but I don't remember watching it. I don't remember what. I remember Mutual Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I didn't watch a lot of TV. It surprised people how much I really didn't watch television. It was, I watched what my dad watched, and then I occasionally was able to sneak in and watch the TV once in a while. So there was a few shows. One of the shows I liked that he couldn't stand, but I got to watch, was Monty Python and Benny Hill. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Because once he watched, at that time, it was KPHO Channel 5. He'd watch MASH at 10 o'clock. He watched MASH when it was originally out, but he didn't even really watch that. He never watched the late night or the Tonight Show and that kind of stuff. By 9:30, 10 o'clock, he was done. And if there was stuff on, which at that time, the only thing I could really catch that had anything other than just boring talk show and that stuff was, my friends would watch the Tonight Show if they could sit up a little later. I watched Monty Python and Benny Hill and stuff like that. And then I would continue it with like Blackadder and that kind of stuff. But that was my kind of content that I watched. God, you think I have a sense of humor. But the Johnson brothers, and Randy and I knew them. I still talk to Bill. I got Bill's number here somewhere. Is this it? Yeah, I talked to Bill not too long ago about this stuff. Yep, that's it. It says Bill Johnson. So, anyways, yeah. So I got their book. Yes, Bill and Mike passed away. I do talk to Bill, and that was it. Don't last me, Wayne. Okay. Benny Hill was really fun. Benny Hill was just insane. Well, you got to think about it. Growing up in Phoenix in the 70s, and it's Wallace and Ladmo, which was one of the shows I did get to watch in the mornings. But when you think about what your normal routine in television watch, my household was not. My dad liked mystery shows, so he'd watch like McMillan and Wife and Beretta. He'd watch McCloud, those type of things. But we never watched All in the Family. It was never on the TV that I remember. Happy Days, those shows never were on. So he was a serious guy about what he watched on TV. Gunsmoke was a regular thing. And so when I got to watch that stuff, that was just absolutely insane television. And plus, they would show naked women occasionally, accidentally. So that, to me, that was so cool, you know. So, and then the few friends that caught it too were just like, "Oh my God, did you see that?" It was just amazing to us. So there we go. I did it on purpose. No, it's hard to catch everything. Don't test me, Wayne. Okay, now I'm trying to catch. See, I did that. I went backwards. Well, I'll test you all I want. First book in the 19... Eli's Dutchman book. I don't remember even looking at high school for any of the books because I think I owned everything at that point because I was on Walson. So was I when it was Cub Scouts. Yeah, the Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, you got to go on there. I never got a Ladmo bag, but I remember going on there. I grew up in the neighborhood I grew up by Palo Verde Elementary, and Kevin McMahon went to school. He was in my age group. And Kevin is Pat McMahon's son. So they used to actually come to our school occasionally and do a thing at our school. But it was principally our age group because his son was there. And that was kind of like, but yeah, Pat McMahon lived in the neighborhood. And I don't remember them. I remember Kevin, but yeah, and his dad was Gerald or, Miss Captain Super or that kind of stuff. But other than that, but yeah, I remember Walson Landbow and Encanto Park. That was a big deal in Legend City. So that's when you know you've been here a long time, when you grew up here as a kid, because you know those things. Encanto Park, because that was Walson Ladmore, always down there, and then Legend City. Have you ever seen a mountain lion in the Superstitions or a bear? I saw one up along the Salt River. Never. I've seen a bear on the trail cams. There was one down by the Quarter Circle U, and I saw the trail cam footage. I've never seen a mountain lion in the Superstition Mountains that I know of. I've seen signs and tracks. The closest I got to the Superstitions was up by Seven Springs, up by Carefree. One ran across the road one day. Went across the road in front of me when I was working out there. So my work truck, and it just kind of came down and came across the road in front of me. A lot of bobcats. I run into bobcats a lot, all over the place. But mountain lion, I saw two. I saw that one that ran in front of the road quite a few years ago. And then we were filming the TV show, and we were out on the Salt River. We were going in the boat, and Frank and them were there, and I'm watching the ridge line because there was nothing to do. We weren't really filming. I was just sitting up in the bow of the boat, just looking around. And I saw something on the ridge line, and I started watching because I could see movement. And I was trying to figure out what I was seeing because I could tell there was movement, which meant it was bigger. And then I realized I tried to get people's attention to point out nobody could see it. Nobody ever got eyes on it except me, but I could see it. It was walking right across the ridge line above us. Some distance away, but yeah, that was the first time I saw one. I couldn't tell you its size from that distance. I've seen them in the zoos and stuff, but never out there in that. Thanks, Wayne. I've heard them in the desert and then the mountains. I've just never, and I've seen the tracks. I've seen scat, but I've heard that basically if you've seen sign of them, they're probably watching you. Because they'll meet up this fall. Yes, November 14th, 15th, and 16th, the Rendezvous. This is a cool show. Well, thank you, Gilbert. We try. We aim to please and try. The idea was for me when we started doing this, and originally started in my truck by accident. I'm not going to go through the whole history, but I always realize there's all these people that do TV shows and you see on TV and stuff. And they just don't talk to people. They talk at people. And I'm sure you've seen them on Facebook. They get on there, and they're like, hey, here I'm in my kitchen. And I thought, I'm not really famous. I'm not really anybody. But there's insight on this side and that side of different things that I can share. I don't want to do newspaper articles. I don't want to write magazine articles. I don't want to do this stuff. At the time, before I started doing the video stuff. But at the time when that happened, I just got done where I was writing articles for different things, and I really didn't want to be back in the thing of writing stuff. I did forums and I would write stuff, but it takes really a moment for me to want to spool it up, to want to sit down and write and put that out. Video's so much easier. And then I realized most of these guys that do television are kind of like a little stuck in themselves, and they can be nice guys, but they won't dare put themselves in this position where they got to deal with drama or trolls and bullshit. And I thought, I don't really care. Does it really matter? Now, the networks don't like it because they don't want you saying the wrong thing or doing something embarrassing or being taken wrong. And I just didn't care. I just thought, oh, this is cool. And people seemed to think it was cool when the show came out that they could actually talk to me and then go down, say, one of the conventions or something, and just meet me walking around, which is something a couple of people said to me at one point. It was like, I can't believe you're just walking around the show. The other guys are sitting there behind the table, and you're just walking around. And I'm like, well, I want to see stuff. I just don't think much of all that. I don't think the guys that are out there, whether you do 1 season, 10 seasons, 12 seasons, 15 seasons, 2 seasons, it really has any matter. Just what people get from meeting you or hearing you is what it is, and there's a human element. It's nice just to be kind and be cool to people and answer questions you can, and we all have to deal with things in everyday life. So doing the lives is kind of fun in a way. I get to keep my memory together because I have to think about things and pull things up. At the same time, there's no Tom Collenborn writing weekly articles or this or that. None of these guys are writing. I think the books over the last X amount of years, I'm not going to say them all. I liked Ron's book, his memoir. There's a lot of books that are just not very good, and they have a lot of misinformation, and I don't think they're well written. And because of that, this is a way where you have a question, and it's a relevant, good question. If I don't have the answer, I can direct you to the information. And I think that's fair and it's right. And part of that, don't go on television or someplace and be the expert and not willing to answer to people, or feel like when people have a difference of opinion, be kind of like stuck up your own butt about it. I mean, people have different opinions, whatever, so it's kind of always good. So no, that was, I do it because there's just no one really doing that stuff, and but there's so much fake, and that's the other problem, Glenn, is there's so much fake, it's hard to tell from the fake. If you meet me, you realize this is me, and this is how I am. And sometimes you'll catch me in a little bit of a mood, but it's rare. And if you catch me and Frank together, you'll realize how toxic that relationship really is, and how much I mess with Trevor all the time, but he's my son and I love him. But you get to see that, okay, there's not separation. It's not a character. It's not this. It's not that. When I did Legends, I was pissed off. They kept me pissed off by not listening to me, and the guys around me that I worked with, they're my friends, but I was always pissed off at them for being a bunch of jagoffs. And it comes off on the TV, you can tell. I really wanted minimum conversation, just let's get through this so we can do it. And the best stuff where I talked freely and I was really myself is not what they wanted to use. They used the angry version of me. And I don't seem really a butthead, but I was kind of ready to go off. So, and I went off a couple times on people there. Any truth to the story on the diamonds was Joe. His name was Joe. I can't remember the last name. It was a newspaper article anyways. That was the Cave of the Thousand Eyes. He thought he found diamonds, and it turned out just to be quartz crystals all through the cave. And that's in the Haunted Canyon area. But that's the only one I've ever heard of. I don't know. I've never even heard of low-grade diamonds like they find in the South. I think Arkansas is big on that, right? Is it Arkansas has those little low-grade diamond fields and stuff? But yeah, it's I don't think I've ever heard diamonds, but it was a caldera. It was volcanic activity. Who knows? but I don't think anybody ever thinks of looking for diamond. How much stuff could be passed over in the superstitions because no one's thinking about the complexity of what happened there, right? That super fission, whatever went on. It's not like a melting star, but a lot happened there. And, it's geologically. A couple geologists I talked to, I always ask them, why doesn't somebody just do a book purely on the superstitions and that kind of stuff? Because it's so different than other places. And they said that's it, is like they don't want ridiculed, like how much gold's been found there and this and that. They don't want to be ridiculed against what academia says and what really is there. But it would be interesting to hear a book on just the geological layering and everything there. What's for dinner tonight is steak, I believe. I think tonight is steak. I don't think it's pizza. I think pizza's Sunday when the nephews visit. Is that a Marshall DSL behind you? Yeah, I believe it is. I got that Marshall, and then down under behind the Telecaster, underneath the Ovation, the Telecaster behind the Vox is another Marshall, and there's another Marshall over here to my left. So I got 4 Marshalls, 1 Vox, right? 4 Marshalls, 1 Vox. Ooh, hold it. That's a Fender. I am so sorry. That is a Fender. There's a Fender amp. The Marshall's right here by my foot. So I got a Marshall here, Marshall there, line 6, Fender, Vox, Marshall, and there's another Marshall in the garage, and there's another amp, I can't remember the name of it, and then up there's a Gibson from the 1940s. I think the 30s or 40s. It's one of the early amplifiers, and it was a barn find. I've never fixed it up. I just left it in its original state after it was cleaned off and stuck it up on a shelf, because I realized it's not going to have this sweet tone or nothing. It's really not. So it's there. So, but yeah, I really like Marshalls. I like the Fender. It just depends what you're suited to. I don't really record live miking anymore, but it's just I don't have the room for it. It doesn't breathe right. So most everything I will do a little live miking at a lower volume, and then just run things straight through and try to mix the signal, because I like the warmth of a room. I like the distance that you get when a room breathes, but this room does not breathe. This room chimes all the guitars anymore. Big mistake of hanging guitars on your wall. Everything chimes. So I have, like, here I have a hollow body, a 6-string, a resonator, and then I have a 12-string there. So, and then there's the classical over there. So, and then there's a classical down there, which is Trevor's. So those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guitars, the Ovation, that's 7. So all those guitars there ring out into the room. So if a dog comes in here and barks, you can hear if there's something out of tune. So I know how to, if I need to tune guitars up, because when there's a loud noise, I can tell something's out of tune by the ring in the room. Pretty interesting, huh? And then I screwed myself up because this is an open G, and this is in Dadgad over here. So now I've started putting things in different. Well, that's an open G too, the resonator. So I have things in different tunings, but they still, if something's off, you will hear it in the room. It does kind of give you like, ooh, that's flat. Something's flat in here. There you go. That was too much on that. What? Back in the day, it was in on demand. They really put out the value. Oh. It's not volume, it's tone. I used one of those, what are they, the 10, 15 watt Marshalls? Through a 412 cabinet. And it breathed really good in the room. And it really rocked. And it had a good tone. So it's certain amps. And I was a big fan, and still am, of tube amps. But they would breathe a certain way. And then if you paired them with the right cabinet and stuff, and in an open room, they would breathe. And that's why you see a lot of bands, everything on the stage is not there. What is it, Brian May at Queen? no matter what you see, it's just a couple Voxes under the stage that you're hearing the noise. A lot of musicians, everything's back behind the back line, and there's actually live amps. They're not using solid state stuff. They're using old tube amps, and they have backups, but they run them kind of behind the scenes. So it is what it is. But yeah, there's nothing like an old tube amp. Let's see. Did you ever get your Mustang up and drivable? No, it's still in progress. See y'all next week. David's done. He says, you're talking guitars and stuff. I'll be talking to you, David, on the phone here soon. But no, it's in its working phase process. I didn't get much done to it this winter. Part of it was money, because it's a lot of money sometimes to sink into things doing done with it. I have a lot of parts built up, and I have a lot of things that I'm working on it that take time. So I'm going to get to a certain point, and then a bunch of stuff's going to happen again. So it's close, but I want a number of things done before I would take it out normally. Great night. Thanks so much for weighing. Tell those boys to take care. Evening, play those damn guitars. I will, Ed. I always do. Was earlier, and I will later tonight. Ever witness a flash flood? I was at one time. It was raining back in the mountains. We will end with this. And have a great Memorial Day. Thank you. I was back in the mountains, and it was raining heavy. There was times I've been back in there, and it rained heavy, and I never saw anything. And I can't remember where I was. I'm trying to remember where I was. And there was water running through the canyon. And I was looking at it, and I was kind of up higher up away from it. But I was thinking, well, you want to stay out of the low areas because of flash flood possibilities. And then it sounded like rain coming. You know how you can hear the rain sometimes coming down the street or something hitting the roofs and stuff? And I could hear it. And I thought that's weird, because you wouldn't hear it in the mountains like you would in the city. And I was looking down and realized what I was hearing is the water coming down, that muddy push of all this stuff moving through it. It was carrying debris and wood and all kinds of stuff. And it was probably a good couple feet of water or something, just like coming flooding through there. And then it was another wash after that. That was the only time I've ever seen that. I was in the right place, the right time to witness that in the Superstitions. I've seen it in other places where everything, you got a creek and then the water comes down and it starts filling up. But I've never seen it quite like that, where I heard something, looked, and saw that. And it ran like that for probably an hour, half hour to an hour. And then it just kind of mellowed out, and then probably within 30 minutes after that, it was down to normal again. It was really kind of crazy to see, but it also taught me a lesson how much it could change. I've never seen one I've seen the evidence of it in Fish Creek, but I've never seen one where they get 8-10 feet and they're tearing out trees. I've never been in anything like that. I've seen videos, but I've never been in anything like that. Kind of a subject, and like to talk about it. So Jimi Hendrix, Kansas City, cool, very awesome. And not many people saw Hendrix around anymore. And remember it. There you go. Remember it clearly and functionally. Yes, tone is everything, well, along with touch and feel. If it sounds right, it is right for you. Everybody's their own beast and animal. So I always tell people, it's like, I would rather have an old $700-800 beat up Strat, CBS Strat, than a lot of other guitars, because they just kind of play right regardless. And it's it's your hands, but it's the tone of the amp and what you use in your settings, and all those things together will give you some tone. But your own identity is these things. That's where it comes from. No matter what I do, no matter what I change on an amp, no matter what I do, when I listen to tapes, I'll be like, who was that playing? Oh, that was me. Because I can tell my playing not by style, but the tones and stuff. Because no matter what amps I use, no matter what effects I use, it comes out. It's just certain musicians. If you want to sound like someone, you can only get so far, because these things are kind of what that tone eventually comes, how you utilize them, and your genetic or whatever, your physical makeup. So anyways, I got to get going because I'm going to have to pick up some groceries. I got to do a grocery pickup, and then I got to cook up some steaks. So Trevor doesn't get steaks tonight. He has his fruit salad and burgers elsewhere. Ha ha. All right. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Catch the Chasing Legends Monday. This one should be a cool one. A little something different, something interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anybody online talk about it that much. But it is an interesting tale. Picked up a book on it. We'll share that on that. And the following one the next week is kind of something we'd had in the burners for a long time, and we're going to get it done and get it out there. So, and catch the daily this day in the Superstition Mountains, because just picture that I have to sit there for the month and for 60, 70 times go this day in the Superstition Mountains and just keep doing them one after. It is, I am bug-eyed by the time I'm done with those. I think Trevor's bug-eyed by the time he gets done editing them. So anyways, thank you, everybody. We do appreciate everybody coming into the lives, and we appreciate everybody participating in the channels and everything, your comments and whatnot. Even you, Frog. We do. No, we do appreciate everybody with their 2 cents and whatnot and everything coming in. Because if you didn't have an audience, you'd just be talking to yourself, right? And I was kind of tired of that years ago, so it's nice to have an audience for it. And if you guys all leave me, then I'd have to sit here and make up things and type things in myself to talk to myself. Anyways, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. See you next Friday on Live Legends. And good night.